live and share your questions or comments. On this program, we discuss the latest news and opinions of things that may affect the lives of those here in Daytona Beach and the nation. So join Dr. Durham for today's program.
Good afternoon, beloved, and welcome to this edition of the best radio program at 12 noon on a Thursday in the country. This is Let's Chat America, and I'm your host, Dr. L. Ronald Durham. Delighted that you are sharing with us. This is a great day here in the city gorgeous. The sun is shining. Our temperature should reach right around the lower 70s today. Who could ask for anything more? We're happy that your home, your automobile, your office, wherever you're tuned in, and those of you who are tuning in already on our Facebook Live feed, we see you coming in good numbers there as well. We got a great program for you today. As you know, here on Let's Chat America, we have all kinds of subject matter that we talk about, and we bring guests on to share their expertise in areas that are of concern or of interest to you, our listeners. Today is no different. We've got two great guests that are going to share with you today. If you want to call and talk to them or make a comment, you can do that. Pick up the phone, dial those 10 numbers. You know what they are, 386-868-0635. That's 386-868-0635. I'm so delighted to have you listening today. My two guests today, one of them goes way back to back in the day when I had the privilege of being the senior pastor of the first Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church in the big city of Newark, New Jersey. And I was the moderator there of the North Jersey District Missionary Baptist Association, about 73 churches that I had the privilege to be moderator of for 4 years. We did some great things there, and this young man who is on the line with me today was a key instrument in some of the great work that we were able to accomplish. His name is the Reverend Dr. Francis Gilliard. He's the senior pastor now. He has moved from Newark. He's now the senior pastor of the Triumphant Temple Church of Praise. They're in the Flint, Michigan area, and we're happy to have him on the program today. Yvette, I see you on the Facebook Live feed. Lynette, beloved, we see you listening as well. Also today, we have Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey. Now, this young lady has already stamped her claim on prominence and fame. She is the author of a fact-based historical documentation about what we're going to be talking about today, and that is the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Her book is called Wakening and Underneath the Poisoning, Flint and Genesee County Are Untold Stories. And she won the International Book Award back in 2020. And we're happy to have both of them on Let's Chat America. Welcome, Dr. Gilliard and Mrs. Harvey. We're happy to have you on the program today.
Good afternoon, Dr. Durham. It is a privilege and pleasure. Thank you for inviting us. We are just pleased to have this invitation.
Well, we're happy to have you on the program today. As I mentioned to our callers, you can pick up the phone if you'd like. But I know many of you are just going to be listening. You're not going to want to pick up the phone and ask questions because this is a great interview today with these two leaders in the Flint, Michigan area. Allison, we see you on the Facebook Live feed, and those who are pouring in, blessings to all of you. So let's get right in it, Dr. Gilliard and Mrs. Harvey, and talk about what's going on over in Flint, Michigan. We've all seen the headlines. It was the top story for weeks and months. Not long ago, the incredible conditions in Flint when it came to the water. So let's get right into it. And you all can jump in, either one of you, on any of these questions as we begin. So let's start at the beginning. When did the Flint Water Crisis start?
I'll take the first question. And
Okay.
but before I do that, let me say good morning to all of Florida, and thank you so much for having us, and also for having the spirit to keep our crisis in the forefront. But certainly we are still going through the crisis, so we thank you humbly from the bottom of our hearts for having the spirit to keep it in the forefront.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. And so I will take the first question, and in answering that question, I'm going to try and be brief because you did tell me your time allowed, and we want to stay within that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the crisis beginning, it actually began in the year of the early 60s. There was a desire for the outer county, which we call Genesee County, outer county. That's where most of the whites moved to when African Americans began to infiltrate most of the urban cities throughout America. There was always certain townships that they went to. So that was ours, was the outer county, which is called Genesee County. They began to talk about creating a KWA pipeline, separate from the city of Flint, when we were using Detroit pipeline. And at that time, there were two city council people who went to jail, went to prison over that. So it died. And then it was brought back to life in 2010. A lot of people like to say it was Governor Snyder who brought that to life. But I have to remind people that Governor Snyder was not elected until 2011. The charter and the organization for the Gilliard and Water Authority, that's what the KWA stands for, the Gilliard and Water Authority, was planned and began to be implemented in 2010. So I'd like to make clarity. So this began prior to Governor Snyder.
Okay. So it's been an ongoing conundrum there in the Flint area. And I guess I'm curious, we have water here in Daytona Beach where I am. The city of Daytona Beach has its own water processing facility. So why did Flint have to start using water from the Flint River instead of where the water was coming from previously?
Well, let me say this too. Let me make clarity because so people are not confused. Flint has never been its own water authority. For you to be an authority, you have to have the original source of water. So Detroit was always a water authority. Flint actually was a distributor of its own water, and it could treat its own water. So I want to make clear on that.
Okay.
And so that's where we were. The KWA is its own water authority, and that's what this was about. So for years, we were always on the Detroit Water Authority, and we purchased water from Detroit. When the emergency managers came in, which are supposedly financial managers for the governor, when they came in, what they did was broke the contract that we had with the Detroit Water Authority so that they could also break Detroit's Water Authority because we were their largest customer, and they said what they would do is put us on the Flint River Reservoir, which would save them about $6 million a year. And that was not the case. It never saved not even a dollar. The real issue was to put us on the Flint River Reservoir while they took most of the money from inside the city to help build and create the bond for the outer county, which was the KWA.
So once again, like with most issues, it's about following the money. And obviously they felt that money being the issue was one of the primary factors or motivators for making this switch from your explanation, Mrs. Harvey. And that always seems to be the case, especially when you're talking about communities of color. If there is an easier, cheaper fix or way to do something than what's being done currently, it seems that they find ways to do that. You are listening to the #1 talk show here in Daytona Beach, Florida, and the nation. 12 o'clock on Thursday, it's Let's Chat America. I'm your host, Dr. L. Ronald Durham. My guests today are the Reverend Dr. Francis Gilliard and Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey. We're talking about the Flint Water Crisis. I know you've seen that in the news over the last few years, but it's not something that we wanted to let kind of go under the radar. I felt that we needed to highlight this because this issue is ongoing. If you want to talk to my guests or you have a question or a comment, give us a call, 386-868-0635, 386-868-0635. Carmela, we see you on the Facebook feed. Brian, we see you on the Facebook feed as well. So let's get back to our questioning. What was in the water, I guess, is my question, that seemed to generate the genesis of what they felt was a problem?
Let me say this. I would like, Pastor, would you like to jump in? Because I don't want to seem as though I'm being...
Dr. Durham, what was in the water was an elevated presence of lead. And that generated a lot of health issues, especially for our young children. When you have an elevated presence of lead in the water, it not only deals with their health, but also with their mental capacity and learning and these type things. And we started to see this effect on the children in daycare, in our school system. It also was evident in skin rashes, hair loss, many things that came about in terms of the physical impact of the lead. And then we also had a rash of Legionnaire's disease, which is a pneumonia-type illness, and 12 people, so to speak, and I'm thinking that number it's been proven that number is a lot more. 12 people died from the Legionnaires, and 187 reportedly were sickened by that Legionnaire's disease as a result of the presence of lead in the water.
Wow. Yeah, and that.
And I would like to add also.
Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms.
And I would like to also add to what Pastor Frank was saying as related to the number of deaths. Those numbers that we were given to us, those were given when the crisis first took off. Pastor and I are living through actually what is going on, and we understand that the numbers are much higher. We've had many young people who have died from early illnesses due to a lot of organ failures, kidney cancers, breast cancers, and different things like that. In addition to what Pastor was talking about with lead, I know the lead was highlighted all across America as being, because it's one of the worst things, and as Pastor indicated, it causes a lot of neurological issues, in particular in our children. In 2008, they were reading at a capacity of probably about 50%, when they were 50 to 60%, I would say. And then afterwards, when they did the testing back in 2016, the numbers were down to 15 to 16%. So it has been a great dramatic decrease as it relates to the mental capacity, the learning capacity, and the neurological issues that our children are faced with. But as it relates to the adults, what people did not talk about were the PFAS that was in the water, the Shigella that was in the water, what were the other bacteria, TTHM that was in the water. And all of these are cancer-causing agents. And so we're beginning to see in Flint a large increase of cancer, and we're crying right now for cancer clusters. We're supposed to be done in May, so we will see that. But I'm afraid when we're finished, it is not about today, but it is about the future. There will be many people with prostate cancer, breast cancers, and all kinds of illnesses. They'll all be gone, and the people will be left with this bill and trying to mitigate through all of these health issues that we have in our city.
Absolutely. And to those of you who are tuning in, if you're getting a little bit of a muffled sound on your phone, you might want to download the app for Joy Radio. Just go to tunein.com, look for Joy 106.3 FM at the TuneIn website, download the Joy 106.3 FM web app to your phone. That way you will have clarity that you may not be receiving on your phone right now, and I apologize for that if you're having that issue. But through the app is the best way, or certainly tune into the radio station directly if you are local to our area. 386-868-0635 is the live call-in number, 386-868-0635. I'm talking to Dr. Gilliard, Senior Pastor of the Triumph Temple of Church of Praise in the Flint area, Flint, Michigan area, and Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey, outstanding award-winning author, and we're talking about the Flint Water Crisis. Kristen, we see you on the Facebook feed. Bernadette, we see you as well. Jay Music, my main man, on the Facebook Live feed as well. So, getting back to our questioning, I'm trying to understand how the water became something of a concern. And did this contaminated water have a noticeably different color? Was that one of the ways that the red flag went up about the quality of the drinking water in Flint?
Yes. Residents started to complain about the water color. They started to complain about the water smell and also the taste of water. But despite their protest now, nothing was done. They even took jugs of distilled water down to the state, and the officials maintained that the water was safe. And it took doctors, it took people from other venues and Milligan can expound on this, to actually bring attention. It took the media, it took a lot, Dr. Durham, to bring attention to the water situation. And let me also state that between June 2014 and October 2015, we recorded the third largest outbreak of Legionnaires' disease in the history of America, the United States. And in spite of all that, we were still fighting to get some attention to the water crisis here in the city of Flint.
And I'm sure...
And as Pastor indicated...
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Harvey.
Yes, as Pastor indicated, there was a media blackout. There was an intentional local media blackout for the residents as we lifted our voice. We stood in the cold many days, 0 below weather, with brown water, demanding that they switch the water back, telling them that people had rashes and things like that. And what was really interesting is that no one really wanted to hear us. It was not until a lady who used to be a registered nurse by the name of Lela McGee, she knew how to contact a scientist, a professor from a university. And Professor Edwards came in and he took the levels of lead from her home, and some of them were so toxic. They said it was more toxic than a cesspool. That's how toxic the water was in her home.
Wow.
And many other residents were like that. And it was not till he raised his voice that even our local media began to give us coverage.
I can't even imagine when you envision or picture a cesspool. I can't even imagine that in a drinking glass and someone attempting to digest that. I mean, it's just unfathomable to me that the water was that bad, and that is an incredible indictment on what was going on in Flint at the time. So let's talk about the governor a little bit. How do the people of Flint feel about Governor Rick Snyder? What is the prevailing feelings about him at this point in time?
Let me say this too. Before we go on to Governor Snyder, if I could piggyback this for a second, because I like people to have a concise idea of what happened with the water. When we went to the Flint River Reservoir, our Flint River Reservoir Flint River had not been used in years. It should never have been used. It was because DuPont Paint used to dump there, General Motors used to dump there, all of the salt and the tar used to dump there. There were probably over 15 different studies going on that river. This was prior to the water crisis, and those studies went all the way back to the 60s. That's why we were on Detroit drinking water. And in every one of those studies, it was indicated this water should never be used for human consumption, ever.
Wow.
So from the 60s all the way up to the last one, which was done in the early 2000s, probably about 2008-9. These studies, and even our mayor who was there, Dane Walling, at the time, he was aware because he was a lifetime resident of the city of Flint, that water should never be used. And so I'm saying that to say, so when you go to treat water that harsh, water that has that many contaminants in it, you have to put a lot of chemicals in that water. Once you put a lot of chemicals in that water and it begins to attach to leaves and different things like that, that's how you get what you call a cocktail. That is what you get when the water becomes poison, because you begin to get cocktails from all of the debris as well as all of the chemicals mixing together. When those chemicals and everything begin to go into the pipelines and flood into our homes, they strip the biofilm off the pipe. And this is how you became poisoned by lead. And so once those chemical cocktails strip all of the biofilm from inside the pipe, that's how the lead began to pour into our waters. And this is when General Motors said, this water is not good for our parts. But the governor said it was good for human consumption. So I want to make clarity on that.
Right, right.
So let's begin from that perspective alone, coupled with the fact that the water processing facilities in Flint have not been used for years, and it was outdated. It was not sufficient to handle even water with no problems, and they put that much stress on the water processing system, which was totally inadequate. So in terms of the government, now, and this needs to be said, is that the people of Flint are sophisticated enough to know that it was not simply just the government who was at fault, but there were many local politicians. There were even those that were under the governor's administration that were responsible. So while the residents of Flint are not happy with the governor, there are a lot of other people in his administration and in the local administration that the people of Flint are not happy with. Right. And I would say it this way so people can understand clearly, is that when the governor came to our hometown, as if it was a home, a house, he didn't kick the back door in. There was a lot of people who allowed him in. That's right. And there was a lot of people who worked with him. And I remind you again, one of the first statements that I said was prior to him being elected as governor, the KWA deal was already in motion.
And I'm sitting here listening to the two of you, and in my role with the city of Daytona Beach, I'm the community relations manager here in Daytona, and our water system, just as an aside, I need to say this, there had to be a massive, just a totally massive breakdown or just absolutely sheer neglect by the officials in Flint, because here in Daytona Beach, our water is tested on a regular basis. It's not something that, it's done regular, so that if there are any potential issues, those issues are addressed and corrected immediately. So for water to get to the point of being classified as worse than a cesspool, that's massive neglect on the part of the officials in Flint, Michigan. You're listening to Daytona Beach's #1 talk show. This is Let's Chat America. I'm your host, Dr. L. Ronald Durham. My guests today are Dr. Francis Gilliard, Senior Pastor of Triumph Temple of Praise in Flint, Michigan, and Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey, an award-winning author. Her book is called Awakening, and Underneath the Poisoning, Flint and Genesee County Are Untold Stories. Pastor Andre Johnson in the nation of Guam, the island of Guam, is on our Facebook Live feed today. We're so happy to have you. Linda, we see you on the Facebook Live feed as well. All of you who are tuned in, I knew we'd have a great audience today on Facebook, and those who are at home or at work. This program, we're going to put this program on our YouTube channel, Let's Chat America on YouTube, on our channel after we're done, so that you can listen to it again. I think for you to really digest what these two leaders in Flint are telling us, you're going to have to listen to this more than once, because it is just unbelievable. If you'd like to ask your own question or you have a comment, pick up the phone, dial those 10 numbers, give me a call, 386-868-0635. 386-868-0635. So, to my...
Let me oh, I'm so sorry. I want to try to clear this, because there are people who's driving, who are listening to your show saying, how is this possible when you have elected officials and you have everybody here? I'm going to say this so that it makes sense, because I know these are going to be some of the questions that people want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the state of Michigan is your second most segregated state in America. There was a research done in 2017 by a firm. The firm indicated, based on the housing patterns, the employment opportunities, school, as well as job placement, the state of Michigan was more segregated in 2017 than Mississippi was in the Jim Crow days. Okay. This is research done by a white entity.
Wow.
So when emergency, and I'm saying that to help people to understand what happened. So when the emergency manager came in, they came in with the premise to take all assets from urban communities. And so what they created was what you call we've already had an emergency manager, so we had Public Act 72, we had Public Act 101, and then we had Public Act 432, and Public Act 4, And these public acts was when the city becomes crippled by financial issues, then what the governor will do is send an emergency manager to help with the city to get back solvent. This was the first time they created a new public act, which was called Public Act 4. We at home call that the lethal weapon. That was the lethal weapon that gave the emergency managers that he selected the authority to come in and strip all power from elected officials, to strip all contracts. Nobody in the city, not even the mayor, had a voice. So when he brought his emergency managers in, who were local officials here for 40 or 50 years, who were some of the same families I told you that moved from us when we migrated here and moved to the outer counties, who didn't want to live among us. This was about coming back and taking public assets from dominated African-American communities and privatizing them. It's an old Nazi form of government. So when all of your power is stripped from the political elected officials, when all of the contracts are taken, when they are the only ones that can operate, they put their people there, and that's why the water was not tested. As a matter of fact, Governor Snyder was told that he could pay $100 a day for corrosion control, $100 a day for the entire city of Flint for corrosion control, and he would do that for 3 months, which would equal up to $9,000. He said no. So we were not worth $9,000, but now there's almost $1 billion bill.
Right, right. You know, that's penny-wise and pound foolish to operate in that kind of fashion. Go ahead, Dr. Gilliard.
And Dr. Durham, there was a finding by the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, which is a state-established body, that concluded that the poor governmental response to the Flint crisis level was that of systematic racism. Because for many months and years, they ignored the cry of the people. Government, elected officials ignored, and Lela was right in the forefront of it. You know, she's not simply talking about it. She was involved in the protest. She was there taking the jugs of water, you know, to those prospective places. And people just, as she said, there was a blackout. They just, you know, blatantly ignored the cries of the people.
Yeah.
And so that was a racist act. There was nothing less than that.
Mm-hmm. And so you've really, both of you have really answered my next question, which was, you know, what role do you feel that racism played in the slow response? Obviously, it was a major part of the way that they operated. And we kind of talked last night, Dr. Gilliard, about the fact that, you know, when African Americans in the South, after the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War, many of them on the plantations left. They migrated north in hopes of reaching the promised land in places like Detroit and Newark and New York City and other northern cities. But it seems that the vitriol from the South and the mindset of the South, it wasn't exclusive to living in Alabama or Mississippi or South Carolina. That same mindset was up north as well, and in some cases maybe even worse than persons like George Wallace or Bull Connor. So obviously racism had a major play in these circumstances in Flint, Michigan, and probably still play a major part in what's going on there. So let's talk about the deaths, because obviously this water contamination affected individuals to the point of causing their demise. Do you have any numbers on the number of people who have died as a result of the Flint Water Crisis?
We're going to talk about the 12 from Legionella, because those 12 were traced back to Legionella. Those 12 deaths are the reason why we have Governor Snyder and many of those who work for him being held right now on criminal charges. But being on the ground with some of my friends who were younger than I was, people who had no issues prior to the crisis and who died early from kidney failure and organ cancers and different things like that, we know it was all predicated on water. And so we still have a lot of family and friends who are impacted and have been affected, who now have neurological issues, who have rashes, whose hair has fallen out. Some people have had to be amputated due to Legionella. So the deaths are much more. There were a lot of people who died from pneumonia that's actually documented in the county register, but they didn't put Legionella to it. And they didn't want to do this because, that's right, they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to be responsible for any more deaths. But if you went through the register, as we did, as well as Frontline, when they came back in, you would see that the numbers are high. There were many people affected who died from pneumonia, but they're not placing that with Legionella. So the number is 12 based on records. But if you were to ask me, I would say my number based on the involvement I had, based on hearing people working with both African American and white, fighting with both African American and white on the ground, lifting our voices, I would say that number was well around 500 people or more.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible, the number of lives that had to be lost for something that was preventable. Had people acted and responded in a quick fashion. You want to give me a call if you want to talk to my two guests today, Dr. Frances Gilliard, Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey. We're talking about the Flint Water Crisis. Pick up the phone, 386-868-0635, 386-868-0635. It is 34 minutes past the hour. My guest will be with me just for a little while longer. So if you want to ask your own question or you have a comment about this amazing story that's going on in Flint, Michigan today, you need to give me a call. So there's something called the CORE program that in my research I was looking at the Flint area that was started. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what this CORE program is?
Did you want to take that answer question, Pastor, or did you want me to?
I'm not so familiar with that.
Okay. So the CORE program is a program that was created under the water crisis, and what it was that at the time, it was the ability to create jobs, local jobs, because a lot of our businesses were affected, and a lot of people lost their business, and some had to be shut down, and a lot of business actually died under the water crisis due to customers, and then you had to have the new infiltration in the systems put in. And so the CORE stands for the Community Outreach Resident Education. And so what it was is that the state sent in specialists, and they would train some of the residents on how to go to the various homes to help them with putting on filters for the water, for the sinks, for the showers and different things like that. And so we're helping them, showing them where they can get them from, how to maintain the country. So that's what the CORE program was actually. And it was making sure that they dispersed it out. They would go around in trucks and give it out, that kind of thing. And that has kind of died down right now. We actually have to go to several sites to get that. But that's what the CORE program was in the city of Flint.
Okay. Yeah, it sounded interesting, and I didn't get a full understanding of what the program was. So what's happening now in Flint with obviously there has to be massive replacement of contaminated pipelines into the homes of the residents. Well, what's going on with that replacement of those contaminated pipes?
Right now, I believe we have probably about 500 pipes that need to be replaced. And so a lot of people think that Flint has recovered. It has not. If I was to say, I would say we probably 50% of the way. A lot of people like to believe that because the infrastructure is being replaced, that we're almost there. For me, a community is not the building, it is not the bank, and it is not the church. The community is the people. Because if the people aren't there, that's just a vacant town. It's a ghost town. So the community is really the people. And so until the people are made whole with perpetual Medicare and Medicaid, when the people are made whole in terms of learning programs that are perpetual, jobs, employment opportunities that are perpetual from this crisis, then we have not been restored yet, because replacing a pipe is not the restoration that is needed in our community. The people need to be restored.
Go ahead, Dr. Gilliard.
Let me add, because I am in child care, I want to add this part to the discussion. Dr. Mona Hannah Atessa, who is a pediatrician here in the Flint community, she did a study and she made a statement. I want to just speak about the statement she made, and that is, she talked about the incidence of the elevated blood levels in children citywide. And these levels have nearly doubled between 2014 and 2016. She said that lead is one of the most damning things you can do to a child in their entire life course trajectory. And she said that nearly 9,000 children were supplied lead-contaminated water for 18 months. 18 months. And this is not something that is going to go away in their life. This is something that they're going to deal with for the rest of their lives. And so when you talk about the impact, you're talking about a lifetime, not just a couple of months, not just a couple of years. You're talking about having to impact and change the trajectory of a person's life for the whole span of their the years that they're going to spend here on the earth. That is, Dr. Durham, despicable. And there's been local groups, the concerned pastors, D.C., ACLU, who have sued the city of Flint, Michigan, to secure safe drinking water for the city of Flint. And so there's a lot of lawsuits that's out there right now over this whole drinking water issue. And I'm not positive or well versed in where those lawsuits are, but I can tell you that they are trying to settle in many areas the lawsuits that have been filed. Some have been filed as class action suits and that kind of thing. I really know more about that, and she might want to address it, but
absolutely.
Yeah, they're on the...
Right.
So even when we speak about the lawsuits, before I begin that, Pastor, I think it's important to that we hit on relative to many of the children. What we found out when we began to do the research, and we worked with a lot of the doctors that were on the ground, that a lot of the issues that the children are suffering from will be passed on to their generation. And so when we speak about perpetual, we mean that in the truest sense. When we're talking about generations that will be damaged, that's how it affects children. Children absorb lead 90% faster than adults, and then women absorb it 40% faster than men. And most times, lead is absorbed 100% when children are hungry. And when you live in the poorest zip code in America, which is 48505, 48504, which is Flint, then we had a lot of hungry babies.
Yeah.
We had a lot of hungry babies. And we have a lot of mothers and fathers who worked 2 and 3 jobs, who had to leave their children at home, whose children would probably go to the sink to drink out of water because we used to do it when we were children. And at the time, taking in all of this lead, and not only lead, I like to remind people TTHMs and Shigellos and Legionella and all of these other things. And so we were walking around like toxic cocktails. So I just want to bring light to that. As it relates to the lawsuit, I have followed the lawsuits from the beginning, and so we have the lawsuit, the settlement that we just actually came back about a month ago. We were fighting and raising our voice in Ann Arbor with the judge who's presiding over this class action lawsuit, because the guidelines and compliances were so strict and rigid that the average resident in the city of Flint would not be awarded. So we had to go down and still lift our voice and still fight to have that changed. And so it's all of these things, and that's what happens a lot of times is in poor communities. What they will do is they will say, we're going to come in with a program to fix your roof. And then everybody's happy because everybody's roof is leaking in the community. So when they come in, they say, but you need to have your taxes paid all in full. You have to have insurance on your home. And then you're saying, but if my roof is leaking, I can't get insurance. And so you never qualified. It's all of these compliances that they have in a guideline for urban communities, and they do what they call cookie cutter compliances and templates. And so it was the same way for this lawsuit. And so we just, a month ago, raised our voice. There was probably about 40 groups that came together for the good of fighting to make sure the compliance was relaxed. And also we had to come together, and we spent the last year fighting against GISD, which is the Genesee Intermediate School District, which was governing over our school district, which took all of the money for the neurological children who had been affected, and they were rebuilding their building and renovating their buildings and creating employee costs with it. The average person went from $40,000 to $120,000, while our children weren't afforded the opportunities for the neurological issues they had, all of the specialists that they needed. This money was being used and misappropriated, and we had to fight for that to bring that back. So it's always a fight.
Yeah.
It's always a fight. And then even when it came to them being criminally charged, Governor Snyder and all of those, we had to wait till there was a new governor. We had to make sure that the Attorney General was kicked out, as well as the prosecutors, because they were taking the African Americans and holding them accountable for the crisis, and they were not the ones that created the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to dismiss the charges and start all over again. So it has never ended for the city of Flint.
Amazing. This is Let's Chat America here on Joy 106.3 FM. I'm your host, Dr. L. Ronald Durham. My guests today are Dr. Gilliard and Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey. They are leaders in Flint, Michigan, and we've been talking for the last 45 minutes about the Flint Water Crisis. If you'd like to give us a call, pick up the phone, dial those 10 numbers, 386-868-0635, 386-868-0635.
The following show is a sponsor of Joy 106.3. Joy 106.3 is parent company Ringer Broadcasting, Inc. Its owners and associates take no responsibility for the opinions or statement made by the talk show hosts, callers, or their guests. Statements or show topics are not necessarily the beliefs of this radio station.
All right, we had to get that disclaimer in there. So, is there a plan of any sort for a door-to-door community health assessment of the residents of Flint, particularly the children, as it relates to this crisis?
Well, let me say this. And I hate to have a negative connotation because I'm a very upbeat, vibrant person. Most of the programs that were created to really bring fulfillment and a holistic living to many of the residents, including the children, most of those have been hijacked. Most of those, the funds, we were fighting for those. The funds were used for all other things except for what they were created for. I will say this, and Pastor will allude to this. $1 billion came into our community to make us whole. That money went downtown for development. That money went for for-profit schools. That money was used for every other venture. And then they did a segment on ABC 12 about 4 months ago and found that almost $500,000 of the money was missing. And they said they couldn't tell where it was. They couldn't say who took it or where it was. So when we're talking about a lot of the programs and being able to go door to door, there were programs that were intended, but the money was misused.
All right. And we see that happening so often when it comes to relief efforts after a crisis, the mismanagement or the misuse of resources to kind of make a community whole again. And that kind of leads me into my segue, because wherever we see a group of African Americans and there is a black church in that community, the church is really, in many cases, one of the links to the community in ways that others may not be able to access the community. So what role has the church community played in the Flint water crisis?
Well,
I'm going to take that first, Pastor.
yes, okay. Pastor, Dr. Durham, what the churches have done from the very beginning is that many of the churches have been facilities that give out free bottled water, and we partnered with many people from across the country who came and wanted to help in the situation and donated bottles of water, and we've done this from the very beginning. And then, of course, government, state took responsibility and started to provide drinking water, bottled water, but in 2019, 2020, the state washed their hands of it and stopped providing the drinking, the bottled water. And so the churches have picked that back up because in truth, Dr. Durham, the point is the testing. You talked about door-to-door, going door-to-door. Right now, if they left it upon the resident to determine whether their water is all right. Now, looking at your water bill and looking at we'll just talk about some of the things that they said that residents could do, and they talked about if you want to know the quality quality of the water that you're drinking and that's provided for you, that you can look at the water bill and it'll tell you if there are any contaminants or the testings and that kind of thing. But when the light of the media went off of Flint, the level of testing, the level of concern about the condition of the water, all of that went away. Right now, there's really no real testing being done to determine how the quality of the water in Flint has improved. And as we were saying, there's still many pipes that need to be replaced. They replaced, when the light was on Flint, they got busy. Some of the pipes, but not nearly all of the pipes in the city were replaced. Not nearly. And so the diversion of attention away from the water crisis came through a fight between which garbage company we were going to get to collect our garbage. And so in the midst of the water crisis, there was this big fight on which garbage disposal company we were going to get. That took attention away. And then there was a claim that money that came in the Flint was misappropriated by the mayor. That took away attention from the water crisis. And so basically Dr. Durham, they did everything within their power to take the attention away from what was going on to actually correct the problem. And once you lose the media exposure, once you lose the attention of the national media, Dr. Durham, nothing gets done. You have that same type that we were talking about, that blackout, of the cries of the citizens. And right now today, we have no idea. And mind you, at the same time, our water bill is the highest in the nation. We are paying exorbitant water costs for contaminated water.
So I mean that's just.
And also.
Go ahead, Mrs. Harvey.
Also, I want to say that our water bill, were produced before the actual poisoning, so that didn't happen. But it was the severance of taking us off of Detroit so that they could break the water authority over in Detroit as well as in Flint. And so they stopped us from being a customer. And you will find out, even through my work, is that under the emergency managers, which I said came from the state, in the Detroit and the city of Flint, both emergency managers under Orr, Mike Brown, and Ed Kurtz here in Orr over in Detroit, they hiked the water up 50% more than when the mayors were there. So this was intentional to break the system and to create that. But also, we have to understand that we're going through a period like almost all urban communities. I always tell people to see it this way. Urban communities where African Americans migrated from the South and came to the North to live. They came in large numbers and masses. When we came in, we became like, over the years, we became like Michael Jackson. We may be cash broke, but we're asset rich. We have a lot of assets. And so you now have outer counties who are coming back in for those assets. They're coming in for the land. They're coming in for the trains. They're coming in for the municipalities and the buildings. And so what you're having is public assets being privatized. This was not about a water heist. And this is what I tell everybody. This was not about water. This was a heist did on 5 urban communities in one of the most racist states in America, except the lead leached in the water. But it was an actual heist that went bad.
Yeah, no question about it. It's just tragic. And just listening or seeing some of the comments on the Facebook Live feed, people really are gobsmacked by what you all are saying. It's amazing that this is America. It almost sounds like you're describing a third world country in what's been happening there in Flint. We're 54 minutes past the hour. We only have a little while to be with you on the air today. You still have a chance to pick up the phone if you'd like to make a call and speak to my guests. 386-868-0635, 386-868-0635. Well, you all have really answered my next question, because it was going to be, has the city of Flint recovered from the crisis? And obviously, from your graphic description, the crisis is yet ongoing, without a doubt. So what I really want to do to kind of wind down our broadcast is Mrs. Harvey, you do have a book that you've written, an award-winning book. Maybe you could share with our listeners how they can find that book, and if they wanted to contact you, how they may do that. Did I lose you? Dr. Gilliard, are you still on the line? Hello? Oh, okay. It appears that we're having a little bit of a technical issue for whatever reason with my two guests from Flint, Michigan. My apologies to those of you who are tuned in. If you have been listening, you've heard I think, an award-winning broadcast here on Let's Chat America today with my two experts and leaders from Flint, Michigan, the Reverend Dr. Francis Gilliard, who is a colleague of mine. We worked together for many years when I was pastor in Newark, New Jersey. He was the head of our economic development team for the North Jersey District Missionary Baptist Association that I was the moderator of for 4 years, and he's now moved to the Flint, Michigan area, and just as he did in New Jersey, on the forefront, on the battlefield, fighting for injustice. And certainly the Flint Water Crisis is a terrible injustice that has been done and perpetrated on the people of that area, and in particular the people of color in those communities that were affected. And we're so sorry that we seem to have lost them for some reason. Dr. Gilliard? Dr. Gilliard, are you back? Hello?
Hello?
Dr. Gilliard, we hear you.
Okay, sorry.
All right, we lost you there for a moment. I was saying to the audience that this certainly is an award-winning broadcast today with the two of you on our radio program, Let's Chat America. And Mrs. Harvey, your award-winning book, Wakening and Underneath the Poisoning, Flint and Genesee County, Our Untold Stories. Maybe you can share with our listeners how they can get your book and contact you if so desired.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to thank you for your diligence and your spirit to keep us in the forefront. I thank you, Pastor Frank, for thinking of me, and all of the listeners. I thank you for just being attentive and hearing our stories. Actually, there's two different books. I created Wakening. That's an old book that I did years ago. And Underneath the Poisoning, Flint and Genesee County is my latest story, because we always have to remember that the conquerors always write our stories. So I wanted to preserve our stories and our truth for the generations that are to come. And you can actually get that book under Amazon right now, or either under Barnes & Noble. You can just Google my name, Lela McGee Harvey, or Underneath the Poisoning, Flint, Genesee County, Our Untold Stories. Anyone who wants to contact me can contact me through my Facebook page at Lela McGee Harvey, or either at Lela McGee at lmhprofessions.com. Again, that's Lela McGee at lmhprofessions.com. And again, thank you guys so much for having us and having the spirit to listen to our stories.
All right. All right. Dr. Gilliard, do you have a final comment?
Dr. Durham, I want to thank you again. You've always been a great supporter, and I appreciate you contacting me about bringing this story to the fore. I couldn't think of a better person, a more knowledgeable person than Lela to come on with me. I'm so glad that she was able to come and be available here. So, again, to you and to your listening audience, thank you all for hearing our story. And, again, if you want to hear any more of this information, don't fail to contact Lela and get her book. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Francis Gilliard, Senior Pastor of Triumph Temple Church of Praise, and Mrs. Lela McGee Harvey, author, award-winning author of Underneath the Poisoning, Flint and Genesee County, Our Untold Stories. We're happy to have both of them on the air with us today, and all of you who've been listening, I see you on the Facebook page. God bless you. Listen, stay safe. Make sure you're wearing your mask, social distance, wash your hands at least 20 seconds in hot water for as hot as you can stand it for at least 20 seconds. We want you to stay safe, but mainly when the vaccine is available for you to take the vaccine. We've got states now like Texas that are just out of control, relaxing all of these restrictions that have been in place prematurely. And I want you to stay alive, and I want you to be blessed. And if you follow the CDC guidelines, all of us will get to the other side of this pandemic, and we will be safe. God bless you. Love you all. We'll talk to you next time. Dr. Gilliard, Mrs. Harvey, blessings upon you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Hopefully next Thursday, same time, 12 o'clock, I'll be right here, and I hope you're here with me.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program here on Let's Chat America, broadcast from the world's most famous beach. To request Dr. Durham to speak at your event, please call 386-451-5114. Again, that's 386-451-5114. Tune in next Thursday, 12 noon, for another powerful program hour here on Joy 106.3 FM.
PC 101 Services, located at 955 Orange Avenue, Unit 170B in Daytona Beach, specializes in individual and corporate taxes during this tax season. They also specialize in notary and credit repair services. PC 101's tax professionals can meet with you to discuss refund advance options, and e-file